Welcome to British Biomedicine Institute. Today Dr. Pramod Khatri is going to provide you a basic topic named as review of study design. So basically the trial objectives are to compare a drug with other drug which is already available in the market, to monitor a medicine long-term effectiveness and impact of subjects and their quality of life, and also to determine the cost effectiveness of the drug therapy related to other traditionals or new therapies which are available. So under comparative trials, basically we use it for registration purpose and it is most commonly used, and here basically we compare our new drug with a placebo. So placebo is basically an inert substance, and in these comparative trials, blinding are preferred and it helps in elimination of bias. And it also provides simultaneous analysis of safety and efficacy. So under long-term efficacy, basically it is being carried out in the marketed drugs, and here we want to confirm the safety and efficacy of the medicine. And here blending is not mandatory. We can measure both objective and subjective changes in the patient with these long-term efficacy. Pharmacoeconomic studies are basically the comparative studies, and they try to establish the relevance of a particular treatment from a population, and basically they are also used to calculate the disease burden, and the result may vary from one country to another country. Hence the studies should be a site specific under pharmacoeconomic studies. So there are basically two types of clinical trials, like your protocol based, like your phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 and phase 4. Phase 4 is basically a PMS, post marketing surveillance, and there is another trial named as intent to treat, ITT, and basically these are dose or duration, they continue till the end point are achieved, whereas protocol based are those which have a fixed dose and they have a duration trial. Trial design is basically the clinical trials can be controlled or uncontrolled. A clinical trial without a control group is somewhat akin to a case series study in that it is hypothesis generating but they are not confirmatory. And the optimal design for the clinical trial is to include a concurrent control group, because the intervention group and the control group are subject to the same conditions and the eligibility criteria of the clinical study. The clinical trial design can be of open label. It can be blinded where the patient where the doctor they are not aware, and it can be single blinded where patient is not aware, and each one or both the parents or patients or the investigator they are blinded, and in order to identify the treatment. Open label, so basically there is no blinding, no randomization. It could be done as per the protocol requirements, or we can use intent to treat, ITT, and patients do not likely to be in the placebo arm of the trial, and like your medical devices or surgical trials, they are mostly open label trials. Blinded or randomized trials are basically they can be single blinded where patient is not aware, double blinded where doctor and patient they are not aware about the treatment which has been given to them. Okay, basically patient may get a active medicine or patient may get placebo, and here randomization is important because it will help in reduction of bias. So it is mostly carried out in phase 3 trials, and these are most acceptable by the various regulatory authorities of different countries. Factorial trials. Basically, here the drugs they are used in combination, and here we will be creating different groups like group A, group B, or group A plus B, or they can be a control, or basically these are difficult to interpret. Factorial and trials. Crossover trials are basically those in which all the patients they will receive the medicine, both the medicines, either your active medicine or the placebo medicine. So if I say group A will receive X medicine and group B will receive Y medicine. So after a fixed duration, both drugs are stopped and the patient remain drug free for a short period of time. Then group A will receive Y medicine and group B will receive X medicine. So there is a crossover, and it will carry over effect make these trial very difficult. Some trials may invoke a crossover design in which patients serve as their own control. For example, a subject may undergo a experimental therapy for 6 weeks and then crossover to the control therapy for another 6 weeks, or vice versa. Crossover designs are appealing because the patients serve as their own control. Crossover designs typically will require a much small sample size than the parallel design. Crossover designs should be invoked only for chronic disease. For example, consider an acute condition such as common cold. The condition may resolve itself within a short period of time, and so there is nothing then that second treatment can be done. The disadvantage of crossover design is basically that there is a carryover effect, like the treatment administered during the first period may carry over to the second treatment period. Sequential trials. Basically, in the sequential design, the data are monitored throughout the collection and the data may be analyzed after a block of clinical data has occurred. This is especially beneficial if electronic data capture (EDC) method are used for data collection. So basically, various softwares are available where we can capture your electronic data from the patients. Orphan drug trials are basically those trials for which the drug to treat disease they affect less than 2 lakh people in USA. 2 million people in the USA. I can say if I say there is a ratio, out of 50,000 one patient is affected, so that we call it as a orphan drug trial. And basically these trials are not large, they are not controlled, and they are not randomized because the prevalence rate is 1 out of 50,000 or 1 out of 2 million. Design cannot be used for all the drugs, and specific rules they are basically relaxed by the regulatory authorities. So clinical trials basically use a external or historical control group for their comparison, and non-randomized control trials, especially those with historical control, tend to be biased towards showing the positive result. A clinical trial with concurrent control group and with randomization to study group is considered as the gold standard for evidence of investigating the efficacy of the intervention. So clinical trials basically are carried out in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 and phase 4. Phase 1 studies are these are the earliest type of studies which are conducted on healthy subjects in order to check the pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics and toxicity. Whereas phase 2 is basically conducted in the targeted diseased patient only, where we want to check the maximum tolerable dose or minimum tolerable dose, and we also investigate safety and efficacy of the new medicine. The study usually are relatively small in terms of sample size, and they may or may not be randomized or double blinded or controlled grouped. Phase 3 trials are basically the major trials which aimed at determining the efficacy, and they are also known as confirmatory trials. The researchers they strive to incorporate randomization, double blinding and control group. Whereas phase 4, also known as PMS, post marketing surveillance, they are conducted in a large group of population. Basically here the medicine is available over the counter, and here pharmacovigilance play an important role in identifications of a sign and symptom of the medicine which is available in the market, which is already been approved by the FDA. So under crossover design, basically suppose a patient are randomized to the treatment sequence like AB and BA in a crossover design. So period number 1, patient will be getting treatment A, treatment B, and in period number 2, patient will be getting treatment B, treatment A. So if treatment A is pharmacological, then it is possible that it can carry over into the treatment B period for those patients who are randomized in A-B sequence. So in clinical trial, basically there is a selection of participation based on inclusion and exclusion criteria of the protocol. So criteria basically they are restrictive, which yield to homogeneous sample of patients so that variability is lower. This will require a smaller target sample size, but recruitment will be difficult. Another drawback is that the result of the clinical study may not be generalizable to other type of patients with the risk, or because there is a lack of external validity. Criteria that are less restrictive will yield a heterogeneous sample of patients, subjects, so that the variability are higher. This will require a large target sample size, but recruitment will be easier because we will be getting heterogeneous sample of the patients, because here the inclusion criteria they are less restrictive, and the result of the study should have some external validity. So here is an example where we are recruiting a patient in the asthma trials. So the inclusion criteria here are, we want patients with age range from 21 to 45 years of age, and their forced expiration volume should be between 70 to 90%, and there should be symptoms of 2 to 3 nighttime awakening due to cough per week, and their patient will not be taking no more than 2 puff of rescue albuterol per day. So under the baseline variables, we particularly measure the following items, or we are collecting the following items at the baseline visit. Basically, we will be collecting the tracking information, describing the participants or subjects. We will select the variables which will be at the risk factor for the outcome, like your prognostic variables, or that can be defined in the subgroup. We will also be measuring the outcome of the variables, or here we want to minimize the number of variables also. Randomization. Basically, it is a random allocation of subjects to the study group, which is ethical in the presence of equipoise, because there is a uncertainty prior to study conduct as to which study group will get the best available treatment. Random allocation will eliminate procedure selection bias, which occur when the investigator assign treatment based on the prognosis. So in order to be effective, the randomization scheme should not be discoverable to the investigator. In other words, the investigator should not know the identity of the next treatment assignment. And in the modern randomization process, which involve computer or web-based schemes or automated telephone systems, they are booming, and they are randomizing the patients in a clinical trials. So randomization also establishes the basis for the statistical hypothesis testing among subjects or among groups, and they also tend to balance the study group with respect to the prognostic variables, like variables which can predict the clinical outcome. So if the sample size will be small, then the consider specialized randomization method such as pre-mutated blocks or stratification can be used. In per-mutated block, or randomization is restricted so that there is a balance between treatment group within each block. For example, suppose a researcher or scientist plan to randomize 20 patients in a group A or group B, using 5 block of 4 patients. Within each group they should be renamed as 2AS and 2BS. In a stratified randomization, the investigator actually perform a distinct randomization plan for each stratum. For example, suppose patients are categorized at baseline as having mild, moderate or severe disease. In order to avoid imbalance between A and B within each disease severity, the principal investigator or doctor use a distinct randomization plan for each stratum of disease severity. Masking, or we can say blinding. So blinding refers to the situation in which subjects, they do not know the treatment identity, whether they will be receiving main medicine or a placebo. In double-blinded study, investigator and patient, they are not aware. It will help in elimination of bias. It is not possible to design a masked trial in some situations, like your surgical trials. In such situations, the researchers who administer the treatment should be distinct from those who collect the clinical data. So in that way, we can again eliminate bias, because here the treatment administrator is different, and the person who is collecting the data is different. So under choice of control, or we can say placebo controlled trials, basically these are superiority trials, and they typically provide unambiguous statement of research hypothesis, namely they demonstrate superiority of the treatment over the placebo. And a placebo may not be ethical if the disease is life-threatening or an ineffective therapy already exists. If the standard of care is a different modality than the active treatment, then consider the following two treatment regime, like your standard of care or your active treatment versus standard of care and placebo treatment. Suppose that the standard of care actually is an accepted pharmaceutical therapy. It may not be appropriate to combine the pharmaceutical therapy with the experimental therapy. Then there are two possibilities for designing a clinical trial depending upon the scientific questions of interest, and namely as equivalence trials or non-inferiority trials. So for basically an equivalence trial, it is necessary to determine zone of clinical equivalence prior to trial onset or prior to trial initiating. And for example, consider standard, or we can say active control, and experimental antihypertensive drug. Suppose in the standard drug yield a mean reduction of 5 mmHg in diastolic blood pressure for a certain patient population. So basically here we are providing the choice of control in the patient. So the researcher may decide that the experimental drug is clinically equivalent to the standard drug if its mean reduction in the diastolic blood pressure is ranging between 3 to 7 mmHg. Thus, the difference in mean between the two therapy does not exceed 2 mmHg. The zone of equivalence is defined as plus minus, that is, the difference mean between the experimental therapy and the active control should lie between plus and minus. The selection of the delta is arbitrary and can be controversial. Some researchers recommend that delta is selected as less than 1/2 of the magnitude of the effect which is observed from the superior trials comparing the active control to the placebo. So, unlike a placebo-controlled trial, an equivalence trial does not provide a natural check for internal validity. Equivalence of the experimental and active control therapy do not necessarily imply that either of them is effective. It is possible that the experimental or active control therapy are equivalent because they both are effective. So, the researcher need to select a standard therapy for the trials that has been proven to be superior for the placebo. An important assumption is that the active control would be superior to the placebo in the patient sample of the current trial, or they have taken the placebo being a treatment arm in the current trial. For all these reasons, FDA is very scrutinizing for equivalent trials. In non-inferiority trial, which are basically similar to equivalent trials except that it is one-sided, the researcher question is in a non-inferiority trials is whether the experimental therapy is not inferior to the active control. The experimental therapy is in equivalence trial should not be inferior to or nor superior to the active control. So now comes the measuring of outcome. Choosing outcome variables is balanced between clinical relevance and feasibility or cost. Surrogate outcome variables sometimes they can replace clinical relevance variables because the latter may be infeasible or inexpensive. Like in cancer trials or HIV/AIDS trial, the survival time may not be most clinically relevant but not the most feasible. Tumor shrinkage or CD4 count, which may be used instead or as a surrogate variables. ITT, intention to treat, are basically carried out for mostly in the randomized controlled trials, and ITT analysis require all clinical data to be analyzed according to the randomization group assignment, regardless of whether some participants violate the protocol, were not compliant, and even received the correct treatment. And basically ITT are a per protocol analysis which is based upon the intervention compliance, and there is no requirement of randomization in ITT. ITT also analyze they tend to be conservative because it introduces more variability into the clinical outcome. The sensitivity analysis, in which the ITT analysis and per protocol analysis are performed, is recommended if non-compliance is an issue. Subgroup analyses are important for exploratory purpose and generation of a new hypothesis. Subgroup trials like your racial or minority groups, female or young adults, etc. can be used. Monitoring. So basically, because of intervention, it is necessary to monitor the safety and efficacy of a clinical trial on the ongoing basis. For smaller one-center trial, the investigator usually act as trial monitor. For large trial and multi-center trial, an independent group or possibly consisting of scientists, clinician, ethist or biostatisticians, they act as a trial monitor. Endpoint. So every study has their own endpoints, and endpoints are the overall outcome of the protocol which has been designed to evaluate the primary or secondary objective. The common endpoint of the trials are severe toxicity, disease progression or death. And there are some extreme complications for some drugs also. The primary endpoint are basically the principal outcomes which the principal investigator look after, like your death or MI, myocardial infarction, pregnancy and cure. And sometimes there are primary outcomes they are also they are also difficult to reach. Under secondary endpoint, basically they are basically evaluated when a significant number of trial subjects they have failed to reach the primary endpoint, and secondary endpoint help in analyzing the clinical trial data, and they differ from trial to trial and are generally related to primary endpoints. So primary endpoint, here is an example. The primary endpoint of HMG CoA inhibitor is to reduce the incidence of MI, myocardial infarction and death. And if there is a reduction in the incidence of angina pain, then it will be our secondary endpoint. Surrogate markers. So basically a component whose level is predictive of state of disease or its cure, like cholesterol is a surrogate marker, whereas the primary endpoint is myocardial infarction and secondary endpoint is chest pain. And often endpoints are basically subjective, because they need blinding technique in order to eliminate the bias. They can also be objective because they need to be blinded. And endpoints are basically used in anti-cancer clinical trials, and they are mostly controversial. Cancer trial endpoints are basically they are response related endpoints or survival related endpoints or progression free survival or disease free survival endpoints, and they also deal with QOL, quality of life. There can also be response related endpoints, like response is about measuring a tumor shrinkage, because cancer only very rarely gets smaller without the treatment. A significant tumor shrinkage, so treatment is having an effect on the tumor. Response is not an endpoint for adjuvant clinical trials when the primary tumor has been removed surgically, since in that case there is a non-detectable tumor to measure. So under survival related endpoints, basically they are improved survival is the major goal of cancer treatment. Cure is the goal. Survival is therefore a very important endpoint in the cancer trials and is one which, unlike some other endpoint, is a direct benefit to the subjects. Under progression-free survival, there it is basically a length of time you are both alive and free from a significant increase of your cancer, or free from any progression of the cancer or disease. Disease survival, disease-free survival here means that it is basically a special case of progression-free survival, which is used as an endpoint in the clinical research of adjuvant therapy to prevent recurrence after surgery to complete remove all visible cancer. In this case, progression means the patient has had a recurrence. Quality of life. So QOL is supposed to measure how you are free, how you feel, and how your body function. Although the quality of life is certainly important in broad sense, unfortunately, there is no unambiguous physical measurement or definable property which corresponds to QOL, quality of life. So I hope you have gained a lot of clinical information through this presentation. Please like, share, subscribe our YouTube channel named as British Biomedicine Institute. Good luck. Goodbye.